Chapter 6. A Family of Pets. Pam raced along the shore to Holly's side. "Don't move," she ordered. "That makes it worse." She looked for a board to lay across the puddle in order to reach her sister. None was in sight. Then Pam remembered the campfire a distance up the beach. There had been some broken boards beside it. Running there as fast as she could, Pam picked up a long one and hurried back to her sister. Poor Holly was up to her waist. "I'll have you out in a minute," Pam promised. She placed the board across the deep puddle and walked out on it. She could not budge Holly. Pam had to do something quickly. She saw a thick tangle of vines a little distance from the shore and went to tear them up. Quickly, she wove them into a braid. "Oh, I'll never get out," Holly wailed. "Yes, you will," Pam said with determination. She fashioned a loop in one end of the vine rope and threw it over her sister's head. "Put it under your arms," she said. Holly did this, and Pam pulled. Holly did not rise, but at least the rope kept her from sinking deeper. Soon Pam's arms began to ache. She could not pull any more. Walking back a few steps to where an old rotted tree trunk stuck out of the ground, she tied the other end of the vine rope around the trunk while she rested. Holly had stopped crying, though tears still glistened in her eyes. "I won't go down through the earth all the way to China," she said bravely. As Pam looked imploringly over the lake for help, suddenly she cried out, "Look, a motorboat!" It was too far out to see for sure who was in it. But as the bobbing boat came close to shore, Holly exclaimed, "It's Dad and Pete! They've borrowed a boat!" In a few minutes, the craft touched the shore. As Pete tied the boat's rope to a tree, his father raced up to his daughters. Pam was still tugging on the vine rope. She was nearly exhausted. "Hold on tight," Mr. Hollister called to her encouragingly, and grabbed hold of the vines. He tugged hard and pulled Holly out of the mud. "You saved your sister," he praised Pam. "Now tell me what happened." As Pam and the others wiped some of the mud from Holly, she told the story of the drifting boat and how her sister had become mired. "How did you know where to find us?" she asked. Pete said they had found the oars, and then the wind had given them a clue to where the rowboat might have drifted. All this time, Holly had been looking at her muddy play clothes. "I know what I'll do," she said. "I'll take a bath with everything on." Mr. Hollister laughed. "I guess that's the best thing to do," he said, as she started for the shore of the lake. Both girls took off their shoes and socks, and Pam held Holly's hand as they trotted into the lake. After a few minutes of splashing around, all the mud was washed from her clothes. "Suppose we walk along the beach in the sun so you can dry off, Holly," Mr. Hollister suggested. They set out along the beach. About a quarter of a mile away, they could see the tumble-down remains of an old farmhouse. "What a spooky-looking place," said Holly in a scared voice as they approached it. The roof had sagged, most of the shingles had fallen off, and the porch hung down in front of the house like a broken arm. The yard was so overgrown with blackberry bushes that Pete's legs and arms were badly scratched as he went near the house. "Crickets," he moaned. "Now I know why they call this place Blackberry Island." "I think it should be called Stickery Island," Holly laughed. "I'm dry now. Let's go home." They turned back. Before climbing into the motorboat, Pete tied their rowboat to the stern of it. Soon the outboard motor was purring, and they started across the lake. The other Hollisters were on the dock to meet them. "Holly, Pam!" their mother exclaimed with relief in her voice. "You're safe!" The story was quickly told, and then the girls went to take baths before eating supper. When the children went to bed that night, Zip followed Pete to his room and bounded up on the bed. He was asleep before Pete. In the middle of the night, the boy heard him stir and whine. Pete sat upright. The prowler again? Pete listened intently as he went into the hall. There he met Pam. "I hear it too," she said excitedly. "It sounds like somebody crying. Maybe it's Sue." They tiptoed into her room to see if she was ill or dreaming, as she sometimes cried out in her sleep. But she lay in her bed sound asleep. Where could the cries be coming from? The children listened again. "It's coming from downstairs," Pam said. "Let's go see what it is." "All right." They tiptoed down the stairs, with Zip padding behind them. Pete put his hand on the dog's head, which was his way of showing the faithful collie that he must not bark. "Shh," he whispered. "Don't make any noise." When they reached the kitchen, the crying sound became louder. Pam opened the cellar door. "It's coming from down there," she said. Pete switched on the light. Together, the children went down the stairs. "Listen," Pete said. "The noise is coming from over in that corner." As they approached the place, Pam squealed, but not in fear. "Pete, look, kittens! Aren't they darling?" On a piece of burlap bag lay a mother cat and 5 kittens. Pam had seen very young kittens before. These looked to be about 3 weeks old. Pete looked up and saw that the cellar window was partly open. "That's how they got in," he observed. "I wonder where they came from." Suddenly, the children heard footsteps above them. Mr. and Mrs. Hollister came down the stairs, followed by Holly and Ricky. "Kittens! We found kittens!" Pam cried happily. "A mother and 5 children." "The Hollister cat family," said Holly, "and there's one for each of us." The little girl came nearer and stooped down to pat the tiny animals. But as she did so, the mother cat hissed. "Stay away from them, dear," Mrs. Hollister said. "The mother doesn't know yet that we're friendly. She's only trying to protect her babies." The Hollisters decided to leave them there for the night. Pete shut the window, so the cats could not get out. The family tripped back to bed, but remained awake a while. Little Holly was full of ideas. The next day she would make doll clothes for the cats. She would dress them up and perhaps have a cat puppet show. Ricky had ideas too. He would have a cat parade and march them around the house. Perhaps he could make little collars for the cats and put little flags in the collars. Finally, all the children fell asleep, dreaming of cats. Next morning, they were up earlier than usual. What excitement there was as they rushed down to the cellar to see the cats. They were friendly now. The mother cat was licking her babies, and she did not hiss at her visitors. "I know what I'm going to call the mother cat," Holly said. "White Nose." Ricky wanted to call the black kitten Midnight. There was a white one, which Pam named Snowball. The little one with all mixed colors, Pete thought, should be called Tutti Frutti. And the gray one Holly named Smokey. They could not think of a name for the 5th kitten, but when it snuggled under his mother, Sue said, "Let's call him Cuddly." "I think this is even better than finding a treasure at the house," Holly cooed. "I just love cats." At the breakfast table, Mrs. Hollister suggested that the children try to find the owner of the cats. Perhaps they belonged to some child who would be sad that they had left. "I think the mother cat is a wild one," said Ricky. "Or perhaps," Pete added, "she had a cruel owner and ran away from home." It was not long before word of the Hollisters' new cat family spread around the neighborhood. Donna Martin was the first of their playmates to come in and see them. How she wished she had 5 little kittens. Then Ann Hunter came over with her brother Jeff. Later, when Dave Mead came in to see White Nose and her kittens, he ran his hand through his tousled hair and said, "You know, this looks like Joey Brill's old cat. She disappeared about a month ago." "Ugh," grunted Ricky. "I don't blame her." The children were upset to hear that the cat might belong to the boy. Pam told her mother about this possibility. "Well, if it's Joey's cat," she pointed out, "I think you'd better find out and return her to him." "Maybe he was mean to White Nose," Pam said. Mrs. Hollister explained that if the cat were Joey's, he had a right to her. Perhaps he would treat White Nose better so she wouldn't run away again. The children talked it over and agreed that their mother was right. But before they had a chance to call on Joey, they saw the boy walking down the street. Donna had told him about White Nose. "Where's my cat?" he demanded as he approached the Hollister children. "We don't know that it's your cat," Pete replied defensively. "But if it is, I guess you can have her back." They led Joey Brill down into the cellar. "That's my cat," he shouted. "She's been missing for weeks and now she has a family. I'm going to take her and all the kittens."